Welcome back to Advancing Healthcare Through Simulation, and I'm very pleased to welcome today's guest as a true catalyst for change in Canadian healthcare and beyond. Patty Wickson brings over 3 decades of leadership experience across clinical, operational, and strategic domains. She has established herself as a transformative force in Canada's health sector, and as the former executive director at Alberta Health Services, she has pioneered innovation strategies for the country's largest health authority, driving systematic improvements through evidence-based practices, strategic partnerships, and cutting-edge health technologies. Patty holds an executive MBA from Athabasca University and a post-baccalaureate in business management, as well as a diploma in respiratory therapy. She's earned numerous certifications in coaching, in healthcare leadership, and quality improvement, and her relentless pursuit of excellence, paired with her commitment to mentorship and system-wide transformation, make her a pivotal figure in shaping the next generation of healthcare innovators. So welcome, Patty. I'm so pleased to have you on the show. You have just a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we have so many questions to pick your brain. So we'll get started right away, maybe, and talk a little bit about your time leading innovation and innovation teams at AHS, and what were some of the boldest, most transformative initiatives you helped bring to life in that role?
Well, awesome. And thank you, Lisa, for having me here today. I'm quite excited to share, I think, my journey in the last 8 years leading the innovation office with Alberta Health Services, and very proud of what myself and my team did. So your first question, really looking at where we had to start with, actually had to build the framework is what I would say to get started. So to get to those projects, you had to look at, well, what was it that we were there to accomplish? So we started looking at our strategic plan. What was I asked to do? So based on our health plan and business plan, there was 3 things. Is build innovation processes, looking at adoptions of innovation, and then having innovation metrics. So that's what we started to do, is build the team that was going to do that. So that meant me focusing with a team around the people, I call it the processes, and the infrastructure. So how are we going to build this innovation, team and this innovation system in AHS? So you need that groundwork to be able to be foundational to get started in terms of then doing any sort of innovation project. So setting that up took us some time. And our whole mandate was innovate to achieve service excellence at AHS. So that became our mantra. That's what we're here to do and what we're here to produce. So once we build that foundation, and we worked with innovators and we worked with funders to be able to bring in some funding, then we had the infrastructure to be able to start looking at doing innovation trials. So we just wanted to start one at a time, do them, demonstrate, look at the value. And through that value, we built what's called the innovation pipeline. That's a really detailed pipeline that actually looks at all the steps from what's the problem we're trying to solve. Then step 1, what would be the best solution for that problem? Step 3, how do we implement it in our system? Then how would we spread that if there's positive value? And then how do we sustain it? So that's the basic level of what our pipeline was. So we had to start sharing that. And what we did is we kind of partnered with the strategic clinical networks, because they were the engines of innovation in our former way that we existed in AHS, to set up those conditions to do so. So that's what got us started. And I think that's fundamental to then say, okay, well, what did we do? Well, over the last, I'd summarize 7 years, about 18 innovation trials that we did in the system, touching about over 651 patients at the end of the day. And I would say there's 2 that I'm kind of really proud of near the end, where we actually looked at the problem. We've got wounds in our clinical setting that need a solution. 1 in 6 patients in Calgary actually have a wound, and it's now part of accreditation. So we knew the conditions, the problems there, and this company called Nanotest ended up developing this wound catalytic gel. And I got really interested because, being a clinician and working in critical care and ICU formerly, I knew that this was a big deal and we could do something to make a difference. So we met with a company. We ended up going from meeting them to full implementation in 12 months. And looking at our report, that's pretty unheard of. That's pretty fast in our health system to be able to do that. So our results that we looked at diabetic foot And we looked at the most difficult, challenging wounds, which would be what we call stage 2 to 4. Very difficult to close, and sometimes it takes a long time to close them. So we were able to show and demonstrate that we could close the wounds 56% faster than, say, our traditional products like a silver dressing. And then we looked at the cost effectiveness of that, and it actually was cost savings, 46% cost savings compared to a silver dressing. So, and we not only adopted it, but we actually procured it. And so that is a big win to be able to do that whole process that I just described.
Yeah.
And looking at providing patients with a new solution. And actually, the patients can use it independently. And this product's available in the health system, and it's also available in like Shoppers Drug Mart now that, you know, we can go B2B or B2C. So it was a really amazing project. I'm really, really proud of it. Tons of lessons learned in that whole project that we did, but we had a physician champion that. My team embedded it, implemented it, and we got the results we needed. And we needed to partner to do that too with W21C. So that's a lot I just said, but really huge success in terms of, I think that is what I would call our unicorn and what we did in HS.
Those are some strong metrics, absolutely, something to be proud of. Great work.
Thank you.
So in a system as complex as Alberta Health Services, how do you balance that need to be agile and the evidence, you know, to inform that decision-making in innovation?
Right. So that's a big undertaking and challenge. Looking at what I just shared, our innovation pipeline, you know, under all of those things that we need to look at, we look at 6 dimensions of quality, health equity, health economics, and implementation science. So what is this going to look to implement it? And that's what we plan around. So of those 6 stages I talked to you about, well, 5, because the first one's identifying the problem, is, you know, robust evidence in that whole framework. So that can get complex and overwhelming. But the innovator needs to understand, if we're going to adopt this in the health system, this is kind of our benchmark. So we need to determine how much evidence is enough without over-engineering things. So looking at, you know, what we need to build within our implementation and evaluation plan. And so thinking about how do you look at design principles and design thinking to be more agile. So there was one project in particular we looked at back in the stroke ambulance. We looked at building technology that can help support communication from the neurologist in the hospital to the neurologist fellow in the back of the ambulance and the paramedics to do real visual communication, but also they could see the patient, they could see the CT results and do things instantaneously. And we worked with TELUS around this. So we built the project around what we call sprints. So in the implementation plan to build sprints in with critical stages of what we call go, no-go decision. So this allows a project to say at certain points with the executive sponsor, which is usually an operational lead, did we reach the milestone? Did we reach the metrics that you're happy with? And do you want to go or are we going to stop? So building those sprints in help you to be a little bit more agile and make decisions as you're going along. And then that operational lead can make decisions. And we used that model and it worked terrifically. I'm not sure if it accelerated that timeline, though, because there was a lot of critical factors like installing 5G lines at the facility in the hospital and the ambulance, and things get out of your control. But we do need to work with more agile methods to say, how can we do this faster and better with enough evidence that we can make a decision around adoption? So that would be one example I can share about, you know, meeting the needs of the evidence, but also trying to be agile at the same time.
And it sounds like it's really coming back to that strong foundation of that strategy and moving through those steps as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So with the role of entrepreneurs, so those driving the innovations from within, how do they play in shifting the legacy of healthcare within the system towards a more responsive and future-ready models?
So I'm going to give an example of, we have entrepreneurs building great innovations, you know, that we can work with, but we also have great things we can do inside our organization. So we had built a program around intrapreneurship. So how do you enable your frontline teams? They know the problems every day that they're working with. So how do you enable leaders to enable their staff to actually come up with those problems that's facing them day to day? So our entrepreneurship program that we built, now we've run 2 cohorts. One was called Illumination, or it was called Illumination Academy. So it really looked at building that entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship mindset with our clinical people. And this hadn't been done before, so we joined forces with the design lab and we built a program around this. So we've done now, or sorry, I still say we, but AHS and my former teams led this, and we had done at the time 2 cohorts through this. Okay. So 250 people came to this first Illumination Academy, and they learned design thinking. They learned some of the philosophy about empathy mapping, how to look at the problem, how to get end user experience and validate end user experience, how they start prototyping what a paper like minimum viable product would look like, and empower them to be able to make change in the system, which I think is so important. And we didn't realize the success we were going to have. And then we did a report and shared the report of the great outcomes that we had. And then we actually, the team ran cohort number 2. Another 250 people showed up.
Wow.
And they showed up over their lunch. We did 1-hour sessions over their lunch and really enabled them to see the art of possible, that they can make change within the system, that they can bring these problems forward, and they can bring and look at solutions. So it's been positive. It's now kind of filtered through the ecosystem. People are pretty excited about this. They're like, what did you develop? What did you do? Mm-hmm. And so things like that is a balance between the entrepreneurs outside our system that are creating great innovations, but then also supporting entrepreneurship inside of organizations like AHS, which were so massive, to build the change and be those change agents that we need to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think there are a number of health professions that, some may have more involvement and experience in research through their education and others may not. And how do you kind of inspire those people, which maybe have not done research in their education, to come forward with those ideas?
Well, NHS has done a lot, actually, to look at research. And so the allied health disciplines themselves have built a lot of programs around really looking at research and how they can support them. The teams at AHS get involved to help to look at those problems and then do research around that. And I might talk about this later on, but I think there's an instrumental difference we have to look at between what is actually true research, what is innovation, and what's quality improvement. Mm-hmm. And I think there needs to be a really critical understanding about then how we bridge we do amazing research. So in AHS, they do over 1,350 last year research ethic board approved studies. Wow. But those are time bound, right? So they're trying to build a hypothesis about what is it that we need to prove and what evidence we need to build. And it's usually through, clinical trials and different studies. Mm-hmm. Then we bridge into innovation, and then we have quality improvement. So I think we have to really be clear around those distinctive differences. So that's super important. But definitely research can build into innovation trials. And there's a lot of different support mechanisms, a lot within our ecosystem that can support that type of transition from research into innovation.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I think that's really helpful for people that are interested and don't yet know where to go. Mm-hmm. So what would you say might be the most misunderstood aspect of the transformation work in large systems like AHS? And what do you wish more leaders understood about them?
So I always believe you need to start with strategy. So having a real detailed strategy, which is something that Alberta Health had looked at a couple of years ago and hired Deloitte to take a look at what do we need to do for innovation within Alberta. But if you don't have a strategy, you don't have that benchmark that kind of says, where do we need to go? Where do we need to focus? Mm-hmm. As we know, the health system has so many challenges. So where do you start? Well, if you can have a strategy to say, and there is key performance metrics that the government outlines, and you hear a lot of things about emergency departments and surgery. So those are 2 great examples of maybe looking at where could we focus and demonstrate some early innovation wins in those areas, and then work with those leaders to understand the problems that they have in those areas, and then work with ecosystem partners or innovators to look at solutions. And when I'm looking at innovation, I always talk about 4 things: open innovation, closed innovation, digital, and non-digital. So open innovation means we're going to work with entrepreneurs outside the system that have a great solution that's going to match to our problem. Internal innovation would be something what we talked about in our intrapreneurship program. So building those assets inside the organization, or looking at some of the teams that would develop around our Prius grant that's offered by Alberta Innovates to solve those problems, but we're doing it inside our system. Now, what are the digital things we need to enable? And then what are the non-digital? So that's like care models, workforce optimization, things that we can do to improve the system. So thinking about those, I always look at, are we going to build something or are we going to buy it?
Yeah.
And it comes down to that general philosophy. But then second to everything I've said about starting with a strategy and the problems, and maybe some key areas of focus to demonstrate some wins, how do you set leaders up for success? And I really think we've got to focus on culture. We've got to enable those leaders to understand what the benefit of innovation would do for them in their busy operational areas. You know, they're overwhelmed. They've got workforce challenges every day. And so the last thing they want to do is hear about, oh my God, we're doing innovation and I'm doing quality improvement and we're doing research. So how can we really focus on that to allow them to still run their operational areas? And then I think the last thing is I've done a lot of research and looking at different opportunities. And the Disruptive Edge talks about an innovation factory. And it's some of those components that I've already shared about having that strategy, but having a dedicated innovation team that gets embedded in the system to actually then de-risk, whether it's the company you're working with and operations, to understand this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to implement it, but we're there every step of the way. Because there's a lot that happens in that whole, innovation trial and the real world evidence trial that we do. So having teams that can then support operations, support the team, and support whatever funder we're working with, and we become that Sherpa in the middle, and we help to de-risk all of that, but we also help to accelerate it, work on problems that come up and exist. So, I imagine if we could just start on some of those problems, have a dedicated team to help them, and show some quick wins, that could be a model that we could build in. So I think those are some of my ideas.
Sounds like a crucial component, especially if you're looking at a clinician coming over to start these projects. That experience would be, a wealth of knowledge and guidance there for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what might you say then if you were to give a piece of advice to an early stage health entrepreneur that you'd want to work with or sell into the public health system?
Yeah, so we worked with Plug and Play Alberta. So we started to work with them as a big accelerator. And what we ended up building in that program was an actual orientation for innovators. How do you understand the health system when you're looking at your problem? Is it a problem that the health system needs fixing? So a lot of time there's these big, bold ideas and, kudos to them and building those ideas, but is it really a problem for the health system? So how do you understand that first? And how do you validate that there is a problem? So, and what's the magnitude of the problem? Again, everything we do starts from the problem. So I think entrepreneurs really need to understand that. And through building their product or service or whatever, they're developing, is getting early stage end user feedback. So patients and providers. Again, they need to validate, is this something that is a problem for them? And get an understanding from their perspective how they see things. Because if we don't stop for a second and really engage with patients, I call them citizens because we're all, here, they will have ideas about, what their solution could provide or what it looks like. So, looking at that aspect, they need to also understand their market. Who's going to buy this at the end of the day? And what's that going to look like? And what's their business model that's going to support that? So a lot of times we'll do the real world evidence trial, but then at the end, when we look at how are you going to sell this? Who are you selling this to? What's going to be your price point? And based on our funding models that we have, it's very, funded based on sectors. So now we understand acute care, primary care sector, but really at the end of the day, who's going to buy this? And then they have to go through procurement. So just because we've done the trial in the system doesn't mean we're automatically going to procure it. So we have to follow our procurement rules. So that whole area that I just spoke about is really it's really fundamental, but trying to share some of those key elements with them, and why we did an orientation program through Plug and Play. So over 200 companies got to experience our orientation at the time about, how we can support them and what are those key elements that they need to understand.
Mm-hmm. And I can see that being a crucial piece, especially as an outsider, not understanding how the system works and what opportunities there might be or limitations. So that's, I'm sure, was also very helpful for those innovators.
Well, and I think the companies do have a point where they raise capital, they raise money, and what we don't understand on the health side is it could be 3 to 6 months before they're done. And therefore, they're not an established company anymore. So there has to be an understanding, I think, from both sides, what we're trying to do and how we're trying to accomplish it. So if we delay, we can't get things moving within the system to get that real-world evidence trial started, that has a severe impact on the company, right? So that's that whole commercialization side of things. So I think creating the win-win for the organization, the entrepreneur, and the health system is really key.
Yeah, well said. Now let's go into what excites you most about the future of healthcare innovation in Canada and what keeps you up at night, perhaps.
Okay. I think there's a lot to be excited about. And as we know, AI is here to stay, and it's here now. So looking at, the big system like AHS and other systems, I think we've got a lot to learn around AI. There's a lot of things we are doing in the health system about AI, but looking at, for instance, a digital pathway forward. So we've just implemented Connect, or AHS has implemented Connect Care, the largest implementation. And we've got such robust data within that, but we need usable data. So you need to understand when we're doing any AI that we need to have usable data that can feed into the models, the machine learning models, to be able to train them that's going to be valuable. And there is so much we could start with. And I think, again, when I talked about so many problems that we have, and we create a lot of infrastructure that I'm not sure actually enables us instead of enabling AI. And some other health systems like Fraser Health Authority is actually doing a remarkable job in this. So for instance, they're looking at, early discharge detection. So taking all the key data out of their EMR system and looking at how it can predict certain patients around discharge. Now, they're not doing that in isolation. They're actually then working with teams, giving them the data to say, hey, here's our list of people we have on our early discharge list. And those clinicians can look at it and say, well, Johnny's not on my list today. Why is that? So talking to the physician, having a conversation about that to say, that's ironic. We don't think Johnny's ready. But the machine model is saying Johnny is ready. So taking a look at adding a different data-driven experience for them that they can make better clinical decisions around that early discharge faster, which, where our systems are full. We need to get patients in and we need to get patients out. So, examples of that. So what gets excited is around AI. And AI in terms of digital health, but also AI in terms of how do we automate workforces for our healthcare workers. They're so overburdened with tasks. And there is a lot of automation that's happened. But for instance, looking at the way, you would understand this at NAIT and the center about how we document and how healthcare providers document. I think we have to go back and look at the fundamental requirements of those type of things and how we can automate that. So AI scribes are becoming very, very top of mind, and I think very exciting for physicians and allied health disciplines to understand how could I dictate my consultation or my assessment that could be automatically put into the health record and then become part of that data and that single record of care. I think the other thing that's a real big opportunity is that interoperability of the data. So right now, patients are siloed between when they go to their primary care or when they come into acute care. There's not that single record of care.
Right.
And we're getting better with health information management where, we have net care that helps to integrate into primary care. But until we can see that across the system, and I know CAI and others are working on, providing that data that we could use and for that health data that we can use for research, innovation, or quality improvement. But, getting to that point is really, I think, going to be groundbreaking when we can allow a system for the patients that need that interoperability where their data is housed, their data can be seen, and their data is protected by privacy and our privacy laws. But so I think AI is here to stay. There's a lot of things that it can drive and do, and I think just acceptance. And we've got to learn a lot. I'm actually just registering myself for an AI course myself to brush up. I had a small AI team at the time, and there's lots that we can do inside the system, because being an employee of the health system, you see things differently. So data is not so difficult to access, and then be able to build those innovations. So we were working on things like building a whole pathway for critical care to take a look at how they look at optimizing their resources and how they can build indexes to look at the acuity scores and then match the resources to those acuity scores to really understand how you can operationalize a unit. That's done internally, but it's a small example. Rare diseases, there's so many things that we are working towards. But again, I think there's a lot of ethical considerations. There's still a lot of privacy that we need to consider. And I think being able to, again, be a risk-adverse organization, we're still not there, but there's so much hope and opportunity for what the art of possible, again, is in that area. So exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, you said many things that as a interprofessional education educator and someone who's worked in rural healthcare, I can see the real opportunities to link those professions, that shared knowledge, first responders, those kind of things where they have not previously been included in. So
and just adding on to that a little bit, Lisa, is looking at virtual care and being able to look at, I think, the integration between remote patient monitoring, for an example. We did a really great project at the time that was actually driven by paramedics, and it was a paramedic model that was built in. So how do we monitor patients in their home? And looking at the aging population and things that we need to solve, we do need to do things differently. And so how can you bring in technology that can enable our workforce to still do the work that they need to do, but optimize their performance and how they perform and see things differently? So we've had great examples in the past that I think we need to expand virtual care. And you brought it up, remote and regions that need care. Some of those physicians, they don't have access to physicians, and we've got to look at doing things differently. But there is things that we've done that can make a huge difference. So virtual care is one, I think, that we're not seeing the light yet about what the possibilities are to support those rural remote areas and those health disciplines that are working in those areas.
But exciting times to see what's ahead. So, and we're very fortunate we have people like you kind of leading this area and this work. So thank you so much for coming today and sharing your insights and
welcome.
Giving us kind of the behind the scenes look at what innovators do, and hopefully it inspires others to get involved as well.
Well, thank you for NAIT and everything you guys do as well, and thank you for this opportunity.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your network. Until next time, I'm Lisa George, and this is Advancing Healthcare Through Simulation, where health meets possibility.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, visit our website at road55.ca.